Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, October 29th, 2025, and today we're going to be answering 3 questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last 7 days. And as we do each week on the Roundup, we take our questions from the news stories we feature each week in our newsletter. And our newsletter can be found, the archive of which is at our website, smieconsulting.org/subscribe. And if you go scroll down, you'll find an archive of all 6 and almost a half years of our newsletter going back to 2018 that we've been able to provide for our international ed colleagues around the world since that date. We've been doing that in 2 versions. There's an email version that you can subscribe to on that same website, smieconsulting.org/subscribe, or on that same page you can also subscribe to the LinkedIn version of the newsletter. And between the 2 versions of the newsletters, I'm happy to report we have well over 2,750 subscribers. So very excited that we're able to provide this content through the newsletter to our international ed audiences every week. And this has been such a blessing for me over the last few years to be able to have more and more of our international ed community subscribing to this newsletter. Covers topics related to social media content, online webinars, digital tools, how AI is being used in international education, variety of other online sources of content, blogs and such. We have a U.S. Central section which has the latest news of acts of Congress, proposed executive orders, new DHS or Department of State proposals and how that impacts what we do. Also lawsuits that are pending that are taking on what the administration has been proposing. All sorts of different opportunities to really see what's going on the ground with U.S. international ed issues. We also have a Solutions Central section that takes you through some of the ways positivity that might be happening in our business in a very tough year, how we might be able to counter a lot of what's happening with what the government has been putting out. And finally, we have a global roundup. And I often get questions from colleagues about, hey, what's this global roundup for? And really the roundup feature is, the global roundup feature is for us to have better perspective on what's going on in the rest of the world. Because for us in international ed circles in the U.S., when we're campus-based, we often are so focused on our jobs, our heads are down, we're focusing on the students that we have in front of us, the next recruitment trips we're taking, the events we're trying to coordinate for our students on campus, and oftentimes we don't have a chance to see what's happening in the wider world. Why is that valuable? Because the issues that we're dealing with here, maybe not in the same forms, are struggles that colleagues in other countries have been feeling as well. In Canada, in the UK, in Australia, other Western destinations for international students, particularly in the Big Four, have been suffering lately. And we oftentimes think we're the only one. Everybody else is doing great. We're actually absolutely a train wreck. So that's what the Global Roundup feature is all about. So when we have our when we have the live chat here on Wednesdays, we call it the Midweek Roundup because we're seeing what's happening and we're giving our thoughts on the themes we see developing in those news stories from the newsletter earlier in the week, and coalescing around different questions and how we can be interpreting what we're doing in international ed based on the news, how we're reacting, responding, how we might be able to get ahead of some of the challenges that some of our colleagues are facing. So the roundup on Wednesdays here will go into one of those news stories on social media content. It might go into what the global trends are that we need to be aware of, and talk specifically about how one of our competitor nations, destinations for international students, is dealing with similar challenges, or completely different challenges, but challenges nonetheless from government policy. So we're going to take through all of those today, and the first question we're covering is, what role does social media play in your recruitment? And when I say your recruitment, I'm talking about your international student recruitment efforts to bring in that next class. What are you doing on social to specifically attract them? Are you differentiating in terms of channels that you're using in different countries? Are there B2B and B2C kind of social content that you're using that might impact where you start your efforts? And there are two articles that I'm going to be sharing with you today, one of which is from our friends at Sonorbis, talking about their new WeChat brochures that they make available to folks that are recruiting in China. And anyone who's recruited there knows that in China it's a completely different social media ecosystem. And behind the literal Great Firewall of China, you really need to have locally hosted content and verified accounts and all of these things. So this is something that we do pay particular attention to if you're obviously recruiting in China. And my friends at Sonorbis have been doing it well for a number of years now, back through to the pandemic when they first launched. And my goal in sharing the two articles that I'm doing with you today, with the Sonorbis one, which talks about their WeChat brochures. They've had a WeChat platform that allows you to have a verified account and produce content in local language, in country, and expand your reach and get it in an easily digestible format for the Chinese audience. They're now expanding that to a WeChat brochure, kind of digitizing your international admissions brochures for the Chinese audiences with translation tools and such, and making that available through their platforms. So that's one aspect of what I'm sharing. The other is with an interesting webinar from Tuesday this week. Was it Tuesday? I think it was yesterday, yesterday this week, that featured how different social channels are being used for different audiences, mainly in the B2B and then B2C, or B2C and then B2B. That was produced by Keystone Education Group, and it featured both US and UK institutional reps talking about their social strategies to reach students and other audiences that are critical to their institutions. And both of them had, and I've dropped the link to the recording of Tuesday's webinar from Keystone Group so that you can check out that for future reference. Some really good examples of what institutions are using and how they're formulating their social strategies. And I will say right off the bat, where I am employed at the University of Akron, we have a social media team for the university. They have a group of students that do what we call Life as a Zip, and they take turns through the week. Every week, every day is a different person talking about their experiences, sharing kind of day in life content that helps build the university's student life portfolio up, and we certainly share that with our international students. But this year we don't have an international student on that. Last year we did on that Life as a Zip team. So we are looking at other ways that we can get international student-specific content generated, and we have a new partner that we're working with in Unique Global, and they had folks on campus at the beginning of last week and shot some video on campus and did some interviews with students. We're going to be sharing those out in the weeks and months to come. And it's really that current student gold that I always say that has to be a part of any successful social strategy for institutions, particularly when it comes to international students, because the domestic students can come to campus much more easily than those from overseas, and they have a little bit more regular opportunities to interact with students than perhaps our international students do. So it's important for internationals to have the opportunity to connect with current student content, and whether that's through live video chats, through videos that they're posting on a regular basis, opportunities to chat with them through the social channels, then also recorded content that is available on demand on YouTube, Instagram, whatever other platform there might be, TikTok as well. What are you doing to connect with your prospective student audiences through social. So this webinar yesterday from Keystone really certainly takes you through what they're doing in the UK at some schools, and then particularly in the US at Penn State, what they've been able to do, particularly with TikTok. It seemed to be the most common student-focused channel that and Insta that institutions are focusing on both sides of the Atlantic. And this is something that there was some really solid content in there in terms of great ideas, how they're generating ideas for their social calendars, for their content, for what they're going to put out each week, the day in the life stuff, the video tours, the interviews with students on campus, all of those things, trying to do some of the latest trends, TikTok trends and what have you, and how they build that into their calendars each month for their content, and how they allow students to kind of do their own thing and kind of share an account, student account as a semi-official account for the university. So those are the kinds of channels that really make sense, because the guiding principle for any marketing to international students and to just marketing in general is live where your audiences live. Have a presence on the platforms that your future students are spending their time on. And we know it's Insta, we know it's TikTok, we know students are using TikTok for college search now and content specifically on institutions that they might be considering. And there's some really good content providers, not just students, but also those that are seeking to advise students on global options for study. And they're turning to these tools to really get answers. And if you don't have a presence on those platforms to get in front of them and make sure that they're aware of your existence and your messaging, then that's a missed opportunity. And certainly we're not doing it perfect at Akron, but certainly this is something I've been preaching for years, going back to the late noughties, how important it is to be where your students spend their time. And we know it's on their phones, we know it's on social. The channels that they're using can change from year to year, but the philosophical principle of live where your audience lives is one that you can't deny. It has to play a central role in how you identify channels where your students are on, and what kind of content you then want to produce for them in those moments. That it's not just straight college drivel. It's actually content that they find entertaining, that uses what they call the 7 or 8 second rule. If you don't have their attention in the first 3 seconds to tell them what it's about and why they should be paying attention, and then by 7th and 8th seconds really got them hooked and wanting to learn more, and getting them to stick around through a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is, you have to take that approach. And Gen Z, or now Gen Alpha, has notoriously short attention span, and they tried to say, well, it's not that in the webinar that students don't have short attention span. It's just that you got to make sure that the content that you're producing is good, and I certainly agree with that. And it's what they want to hear. Although if they don't want to hear it, they're just going to scroll left or scroll right, whichever way or up or down, whichever platform you're on. So having that kind of opportunity to include social in your strategy, to have the content that matters for the audiences that you're trying to reach, that whether it's in China using WeChat or other Chinese-specific social platforms, or to other international students that are heavily on TikTok, except for India, where TikTok's banned, and other countries that might have it banned already. What are you using to reach students on social? Are you having to go down to specific messaging apps? It's probably not a broad. Certainly you can have pages that you can be searched on WhatsApp and Messenger and other things like that, where you can be seen as to have an institutional account, but you want eventually students to connect with you on a personal account, whether it's through your individual students, through an international admissions account, whatever it might be, for specific messaging when they have questions that they need answered from an institutional perspective. You have to be able to provide that kind of outlet, because yes, email is still important, and yes, they do have to provide certain content to institutions when they're applying through email. That's an important part of that tool, but that's not their primary go-to for information. I've seen that with a part of our strategy now is we've done through a particular provider, Platy. We've done a number of targeted campaigns on Instagram and Facebook to students in Vietnam and Indonesia. They've gone tremendously well. Success. We've got couple thousand, 3,000 inquiries that have come into our database, and we've been marketing to through our regular ComFlow messaging. But we've also had in-country kind of reps, for lack of a better term, and an AI version of a rep calling these students on their messaging apps, Zalo in Vietnam, WhatsApp in Indonesia, to try and schedule appointments with myself and handling the graduate inquiries, and one of our undergraduate admissions folks that works with our international undergrads. So we're doing that to reach them where they are, and using AI to do the scheduling for us and eliminate a lot of heavy lifting. So we don't have to call and message each of these students, prospects individually. We're having third parties do that at a much lower cost or no cost to us directly, but through the contract we have through this third party, Platy. And we're seeing this, a lot of appointments get scheduled where students want to learn more, maybe take next steps with an application or find out how they apply. The challenge is we send them email reminders about the appointments, but they don't show up for the appointments all the time. So we're fine-tuning it. We've just started doing this. We're fine-tuning our strategy here and understanding, well, our reminders probably need to go to the messaging apps that we've been using to contact them in the first place. So there's the challenge for individual institutions to try and crack that nut. How do you get them engaged and get them to attend appointments to continue those conversations? And having the opportunity to do that through individual messaging apps is a really important step in deepening a connection, not only just generating through the one-to-many, through social platforms like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it might be, but having the opportunity to go one-to-one or one to small groups, maybe setting up groups for admitted students on WhatsApp or other messaging platforms. All of that is to say, you need to be including granular level approaches on social media as part of your overall recruitment strategy. So let's move on to our second question, and that is, what are the latest global trends to watch? We're going to be talking specifically here from our colleagues at Study Portals that are one of the leaders in providing kind of the market intel from time to time, and they've just come out with their latest one yesterday, and it's a quite comprehensive global look at market trends, a focus on Latin America, on MENA region, and in Asia. And not only just how we've been talking about that for many months here on the Roundup about how competition is ratcheted up. We've talked how other countries are wanting a piece of that international student mobility pie. We've shared many times that the U.S. is still number one in terms of overall numbers of enrolled international students, but our percentage of that pie, that global pie, has been decreasing dramatically, even though our numbers have gone up triple in the last 20, 30 years. When I first started in the business in the early 90s, there were 350,000 international students in the United States, and we had about a third of the globally mobile students in the early 90s. A third of all internationally mobile students were studying in the US. And then UK, Canada, Australia were in that mix as well, as the kind of the big four. That has changed, long since changed, and this trend towards a much more diverse range of options in terms of countries where students are actually looking to enroll has certainly accelerated in the last decade or two, when we started seeing branch campuses open up in the Gulf, in the noughties, when we started seeing other countries like Hong Kong, like Vietnam, Korea, Taiwan, Japan start reshaping government policy to align with economic policy, government economic policy and skills needs in the country versus domestic population growths and education trends and available international education opportunities for boosting the number of students coming to those countries. We've seen a real sea change over the last decade, particularly since the pandemic, of other countries really becoming coming to the fore. Where we are regularly seeing over the last 2 to 3 months articles about it's no longer just the big four, US, UK, Canada, Australia. It's now the big 14, which includes countries in the Middle East, countries in Southeast Asia, countries in Northeast Asia that are becoming increasingly destinations, and some in Europe as well, increasingly destinations with 200,000-300,000 students or more. And that's something in the newsletter we featured a story about Turkey this week. That Turkey's now got over 300,000 international students, looking to grow to 500,000 in the next decade. So we see some real opportunities for other nations to build a presence and to become much more dominant in the marketplace. And certainly the study portals report talks about that. It talks about the 6.9 million internationally mobile students in 2023 and how that's only going to grow to well over 10 million in the mid-2030s. We see that why are other destinations becoming popular? They're increasing the number of English taught programs, and that even in countries where English is not the native language, that in Korea, in Japan, in Singapore, obviously, in China, for example, they had pre-pandemic had really ramped up the number of English taught degrees there. And in the Middle East, English taught degree programs are becoming the norm. We see increasingly universities that are looking to become themselves more of a destination for international students, starting to increase the number of English taught programs, because English, frankly, is the lingua franca of education. And increasingly that is where institutions and countries that want to grow internationally in terms of their inbound populations of international students, they are looking towards English taught degrees, increasing those numbers to provide more kind of visibility for to students who want to come and perhaps study in a different country that might be lower cost, that might be closer culturally to what they're used to. In terms of populations on the campus, and certainly in a language that is going to be globally competitive for them, and putting them in a competitive advantage to increase the range of options they have after they finish their program. All of these are important pieces. So the study portals report talks about how the MENA region with branch campuses opening up in the Gulf, but also the first U.S. campus opening up in Saudi Arabia with the University of New Haven. You see Latin America, outbound student mobility is very strong there still. Because inbound is not, because they have a limited range of English taught programs. So these are that's what's happening there. It's more it's an underdeveloped region for students to go to. We've talked regularly about transnational education here and how that has to become, for the U.S. at least, has to become an important part of how we address the next 3 years in terms of options for students to do our degrees in other countries, whether that be through online means, through campus models where we physically have a opportunity for students to take our degrees in another country at another university's campus. We're doing that specifically, exploring that at University of Akron. Or is it going to be a hybrid model where you have some of your faculty go there and teach some of the classes be taught online? All of these need to be thought through consistently to really shape a way of how TNE can become a part of your offerings, because we know the visa situation doesn't look like it's going to be improving dramatically in the coming weeks and months, so you have to prepare yourself for what's next, and in order to maintain a presence and also to build other pipelines for your campus and your degrees, so that students will still have opportunities to study your programs, even if they can't get to you physically every year. So the Study Portals report also looks at some of the outbound mobility patterns, some of the student decision-making factors, and affordability certainly has risen up the ranks. We've been calling that to be the case since the pandemic, when frankly the global economy hasn't rebounded as well as it might have to pre-pandemic levels. So that means that families that might previously have been able to afford the U.S. by reality have to look at other options, maybe closer to home options. So we've seen Hong Kong increase as a destination for international students that might have only come to the U.S. previously, or only applied to the U.K. or the U.S. previously. Now are considering Australia, Canada, Singapore, other regions, and Hong Kong. So there's so many variables in play for international students these days, and so many more opportunities for all students that are looking to study outside their home countries. It's now put up a place where we see students applying not just to 4 or 5 institutions in one country. They might be applying to 5, 6 institutions in 5 or 6 countries potentially, and having backup countries, not just safety schools, but backup countries to apply to in case their top choice destination doesn't get them a visa or doesn't provide the funding that they need to help make it affordable for them. So great report from our friends at Study Portals. Certainly recommend everybody downloading that and or getting that in their list, sharing it with your leadership on campus so that they're aware of some of the real challenges that you're facing in the global marketplace. And it is truly a global marketplace for international students these days. And that realization is something you want to make sure your senior leadership at your institution understands. So let's move on to our final question of the day, and that is, are there limits on what Aussie universities can and should do when it comes to international education? And there's been a lot said in recent weeks about what's happening in Australia. There's been a lot of proposals by the government to continue to cap or potentially adjust the caps on international students that are going to be entering the country. They have increased the cap, I think it was 5% for this next year for 2025, or excuse me, 2026. And keep in mind for Australia, they start their school year, academic year in February. So they're just coming up on what is their fall intake. So we're seeing certainly Australia is seeing the government has had, they're dealing with a much smaller ecosystem of institutions too. There's only 40 universities and about 200-300 vocational colleges. So they enroll roughly slightly less at the university level, slightly more at the vocational level and English language training level, which has been hit fairly significantly since the pandemic. But we have seen the government focused on improving the quality of those coming. They've ratcheted up visa fees, they've ratcheted up test score requirements, ratcheted up funding needed to get a visa to come study in Australia. All that's happened in the past 2 to 3 years. And as a result, the government put in these caps on the number of international students that will be allowed to attend or get visas to attend the different universities and vocational colleges in the country. We've seen the government trying to clamp down on what they call the 2-step migration problem, that these are the real focus of students coming to Australia is not necessarily for study, it's for eventual migration to work and become residents. So that's a challenge for the government to have addressed with its policy decisions. And there's a couple articles that I've shared. One is talking about from an international educator's perspective, and I think this individual is English language program instructor or a director of an English language institute there. And she's talking more about, well, what are we adapting to? Obviously, the government is putting all these changes, and her point is, what are we really making? We know we need to change, and we know we need to adapt. But what is the new model going to be? So she presents some rather constructive thoughts on what campuses should be doing. You also see when I mentioned the caps earlier, in terms of the government saying, no, you can't have any more, or yes, you can have an increase this coming year. Basically, the institutions need to document they're meeting certain standards that the government has set for institutions in terms of maximum percentages of internationals, levels of support, housing availability, which was a major issue during the pandemic. So those are one of their institutions, one of their group of 8, which is equivalent to our Ivy League or the Russell Group universities in the UK. One of those group of 8 is University of Sydney. Which we've reported in the last couple of weeks, they now have over half of their total student population is now international. So you think about what Trump has tried to do here in the United States to limit, particularly in the elite universities that are 30%, Harvard's being 31%, NYU's I think and Columbia are around 35-40% each. And his attempts to limit undergraduate international populations to 15% through his Trump Compact, which isn't really getting a lot of traction, and certainly the elites aren't able to do that financially. That would be devastating for them. But we're seeing at the University of Sydney, 50% of its students are now international, and the government, they had applied, as did every institution, for more slots for international students for next year, and the government said, no, you're done. 50% is the max. So the Australian government has set a limit on, and they're saying basically you can't have more than half your students be international, so University of Sydney is not getting any more. But one of the larger questions for Australian institutions is that in addition to the standards that institutions now need to hit in terms of housing availability and placements for students in housing, you now have folks, like we've been saying here for years, on one of the main competitive advantages for students who are educated in the United States is the career services preparation that students generally receive in the U.S. is at a higher level because of it being embedded, practical experiences, experiential learning being embedded into the curriculum in most programs, particularly at the undergraduate level, and how that elevates a student's opportunities for employment after graduation. So other countries are kind of getting this now, and certainly in Australia it's no exception that there's a JSA, Job Skills Australia commissioner released recently in September its International Students Pathways and Outcomes Study with 11 recommendations to support a strong Australian workforce. And part of that was improving employability skills of international students. Not only English language skills, which is the obvious one, but job skills that they are learning, practical opportunities to get experience before they finish their degrees, which we do so well here in the United States in most cases. This is now being emphasized more in Australia as a priority for institutions to really take that next step. So very interesting set of stories this week, and really seeing, I think, all positives in terms of what it's increasing the level of competitiveness between countries, to realize that this is not something we can take for granted anymore, that we have to be proactive with our attempts to provide our international student audiences and their parents, for undergrads especially, with a broad explanation of what's available for students if they choose to come to our institutions, because these are the things that students want to know. It's outcomes based now. It's I'm going to be paying my parents, or I'm going to be paying a lot of money to attend your institution. I want to know what I'm getting out of it. And that if you're not ready for that question, and if you don't have the data or at least anecdotal stories to back up how your international students are doing once they finish their degrees, you're going to be on the back foot, and students will lose interest very quickly when you can't answer those very core questions that are increasingly a driver for where they decide to apply, and certainly where they decide to enroll. So hopefully you got some great content today and some ideas that you can take back to leadership. Certainly get subscribed to the newsletter if you're not already. Thanks for listening to and watching live or on repeat. Certainly grateful that you're making SMIE consulting part of your international edification this week. Have a great day. Chat with you next time. Next week, just for example, I will be in the Philippines attending a summit for GSM, one of our main recruiters. They bring together their top agents from their partners in all of Southeast Asia, and we're going to be gathering together for a lot of team building exercises in a very positive environment and one-on-one meetings with these agency partners. So I will be doing a live from Boracay, Philippines next week. So until next week, have a great day. Cheers.